so what we're going to look at is Kennedy's administration. What was the biggest thing they feared about Kennedy? He was what? Catholic. And the biggest fear, and I promise you, there's like an EOC question, you're all going to take a benchmark, and that's like the biggest fear they had about Kennedy was him being a Catholic, because they were fearful that the Pope would tell him what to do. Right? And so we know that with the Klan, we've seen that anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant. So this was the greatest fear, and we saw that in the 1920s with Al Smith. So on the end of our Eisenhower doctrine, there was the thing about the Kennedy-Nixon debates. And we're in this little tipping point in society that people are listening it on the radio and people are listening it on the TV. And you have to realize, when we listen, we really listen with our eyes. I know that sounds weird, right? We really listen with our eyes. And so when people are watching it on TV, who do they think who does better? Kennedy, the one who looks better, because we listen with our eyes, and when Kennedy's speaking, the nation is tuning in. But when Nixon's speaking, is anybody tuning in? And there's a lot of things going on. There's advice that has been given to Kennedy that when you go on TV, what must you also put on? Makeup, because if you don't put on makeup, what's going to happen to you? You're going to be washed out. So Kennedy puts on the makeup, even though his message isn't as strong as Nixon. He looks better. When Nixon's on there, he looks washed out. He looks sick. And again, we listen with our eyes. Does that have an impact on this election? When people heard it on the radio, hands down, Nixon won. And you have to understand, he is a veteran congressman. He's been a red hunter. He has a foreign policy. And so this election, the TV becomes a popular, just like we saw with Eisenhower with that commercial. Remember that commercial? I like Ike, you like Ike. I'm not going to sing it because I don't sing well. So amidst Kennedy's campaign, he promises a new frontier, that he wants federal aid for health care and education. So do y'all know Medicaid and Medicare? Mm-hmm. Those were his ideas, but he's not going to be able to achieve them. Cutting taxes. Controlling prices because we're having inflation. He wants to create a national defense. Okay? He will start that, but it's something that his predecessor, LBJ, will go a lot further. He wants us to get to space. Will we get to space in his time? No, we don't get there till 1969 in Nixon's administration. Okay? We're going to, to moon. We get to space in 63, but to the moon, that's what he challenges in this time period. So a lot of the things that he challenges, it is not achieved in this time period. It's for other people to achieve. The main reason why he doesn't achieve this is because there's a people in Congress, which was one of our questions, that's blocking him. So let's look at this political cartoon. There's JFK there. Anytime you see a female next to a guy labeled GOP, this should make you think of a party. What party is this?
Dixiecrats.
The Dixiecrats. And it will always be a woman who will signify the Dixiecrats. And what is this woman doing with all of his plans for medical aid, tax reform, education? Throwing them away because they are going to block. Eventually, the Dixiecrats were Democrats, but what party will they join? The Republicans. Okay, so we're going to see some of the programs that he does get to go through Congress is Peace Corps. Have you ever heard of the Peace Corps? Okay, and this is one where they go into third world countries because we will see that we fear communism could take a stronghold here, and we're going to bring in education, we're going to bring in medical care, and we're actually going to bring in ways to farm that is more productive for their society. The space program takes off, and he promises by the end of the decade, which is true in the Nixon administration, we will get to the moon. Civil rights, we've already seen this when I did the civil rights PowerPoint, that he promised legislation in his new frontier, but what group is blocking him every single time in Congress? The Dixiecrats. So we know the Freedom Riders were trying to go from Virginia all the way down to Texas on these buses, and they were bombed. Some of the people were taken out and brutally beaten. And this is just showing us the resistance in the South to civil rights. Are they violating federal laws? Yes, and this is why it's called the Civil Rights Movement, just like the Civil War, because it's a fight between the states and the federal government. We also saw in our study guide James Meredith, Vivian Malone, and James Hood try to get into universities. We talked about Ole Miss and Alabama. Are they allowed in the door? No. Are they violating cases by not letting them in? And so this is why Bobby Kennedy, who's the Attorney General, sends in the marshals to help them get registered. We're going to see other things are going to occur. We didn't get to see this in the video, but there's going to be massive marches in Birmingham. And in Birmingham, instead of using the adults, they're going to go out to the kids. And it's when the kids come out that they bring out, Bull Connor brings out the hoses, and he hoses the kids down. Our fire hoses as friendly as your local watering hose. And so the kids are also attacked by the dogs, and this is when he goes on there saying what has happened in Birmingham is prudent, that we cannot deny that justice is needed. And again, what branch of government is he talking out to? Legislative. And this is why the March on Washington is had, because they're calling out the legislative branch to do legislation. Do they do it in his time? No. And we know he's assassinated, and we're not going to dovetail into all the different conspiracy theories. But it is his death that is going to be used by who to get civil rights legislation passed? Who's the guy who's going to come after him? Lyndon Baines Johnson is going to come in and use his death in Congress to get the Civil Rights Act of '64. All of this we've seen in our other presentation.
Why is it that like all of the important things